The real Lone Ranger was black. A woman fooled the U.S. Army for almost 2 years, and no one noticed. A famous photo erased the thousands who built the railroad. But one of these stories was buried deeper than all the rest, and I'll only tell you which near the end, so stay with me. Anything that didn't fit the legend was cut. Subscribe, because we're putting these names back into history. Number 1. You grew up watching The Lone Ranger. Mask, white hat, white face. But the man who probably inspired the legend looked nothing like the actor on your screen, and that's exactly why you were never told his name. His name was Bass Reeves. He was born enslaved in Arkansas in 1838, escaped during the Civil War, and hid in Indian Territory, where he learned the Creek and Seminole languages. In 1875, he became one of the first black deputy U.S. marshals west of the Mississippi. For 32 years, he hunted outlaws in the most violent region of the country. He used disguises as a farmer, a preacher, even an outlaw. He arrested more than 3,000 criminals and killed 14 men in shootouts without ever being shot. Outlaws were more afraid of him than they were of the gallows. He couldn't read, but he memorized every warrant that was read out loud to him. He even arrested his own son, who was accused of murder, because to him, the law came first. When he died in 1910, newspapers barely reported it. Years later, Hollywood turned the story into a legend and erased the face of the real man. But here's the question that changes everything. Was Reeves a one-in-a-million exception, or just the one name that slipped through? Because the real numbers are something Hollywood spent decades hiding. Number 2, count 4 cowboys on any movie poster, then erase one, because historians estimate that as many as 1 in every 4 cowboys in the Old West was black. While John Wayne ruled the big screen, the real story was very different. After the Civil War, thousands of formerly enslaved people hit the road toward Texas and Kansas. Out there, nobody asked where you came from. They just wanted to know if you could handle 10 hours on horseback driving cattle. The most famous of them was Nat Love, born enslaved in Tennessee in 1854. At 15, he headed west with little money in his pocket. He learned to break horses better than many experienced riders. In 1876, in the town of Deadwood, he won a roping and shooting competition against the best in the area and earned the nickname Deadwood Dick. He even wrote his own autobiography telling the whole story. So, the West had far more color than the movies ever showed, which raises an uncomfortable question. If a black man could hide in plain sight as a legendary cowboy, could a woman hide inside the United States Army? One of them did, for almost 2 years. Number 3. In 1866, right after the Civil War, a formerly enslaved woman from Missouri named Cath Williams showed up at a recruiting station in St. Louis. She reversed her name, introduced herself as William Cath, and signed the papers. Think about it. The entrance exam was so superficial that the doctor didn't even ask her to take off her clothes, and she passed. That made her the only documented woman to serve as a buffalo soldier in the black regiments that patrolled the West. She marched, carried a rifle, and handled the same hard work as any man in the 38th Infantry. And she kept it up not for a week, not a month. The secret only came out in 1868, when she got sick, and a doctor at the post discovered the truth. She was discharged but never arrested. After leaving the Army, she worked as a cook and laundress in Colorado. Years later, when she applied for a veteran's pension, the government denied her. Even though her service was documented in the records, she was erased from a list. Hold that thought, because next, thousands of men were erased from a single photograph, and that photo is famous. Number 4. In 1869, when the final spike of the Transcontinental Railroad was driven at Promontory, Utah, photographers captured the historic moment. Look closely at that photo and tell me what's missing. There isn't a single Chinese face in it. And that's strange, because around 15,000 Chinese workers did the hardest work on the Central Pacific Railroad. They were the ones who made their way through the Sierra Nevada, blasting tunnels through granite with gunpowder and nitroglycerin, moving forward only a few inches a day. In the winter, they worked under several feet of snow, and avalanches swallowed entire camps. Some bodies didn't appear until the spring thaw, still holding their tools. No one knows the exact number of deaths. But in 1870, a newspaper reported something chilling. A train headed west, carrying nearly 10 tons of bones, the remains of Chinese workers being sent back to their homeland. They literally moved mountains. And when it was time to take the photo that went down in history, they were simply left out. The railroad united a country by forgetting the men who built it. But the next story is worse, because these people were promised protection under an American flag. Number 5. Imagine waking up at dawn with the American flag flying over your tent as a promise of peace, and still being attacked by the very army that promised to protect you. That's exactly what happened on November 29, 1864, in the Colorado Territory. Cheyenne Chief Black Kettle had negotiated peace and set up camp along Sand Creek, following the government's own orders. Trusting the officer's word, most of the warriors left to hunt. About 700 people remained in the camp, nearly all of them women, children, and elderly people. That's when Colonel John Chivington, a former Methodist minister, showed up with 675 volunteer soldiers. Black Kettle raised the American flag and a white flag. It didn't matter. For hours, the troops killed more than 150 defenseless people and mutilated their bodies. Afterward, soldiers paraded through Denver displaying body parts as trophies while the crowd cheered. Congress investigated and called it an act of cowardice, but no one was ever punished. Chivington died a free man decades later. Sand Creek was 1864. You'd think the Army would have learned. 26 years later, the same regiment number does it again, and this time hands out medals. Number 6. December 1890. Bitter cold in South Dakota. The 7th Cavalry Regiment, yes, the same one that served under Custer, surrounds a camp of about 350 Lakota, mostly women, children, and elderly people. They were hungry, freezing, and had already surrendered. The soldiers begin collecting their weapons. Then a shot goes off, no one knows who fired it, and all hell breaks loose. Hotchkiss guns on the hills rain fire down on the tents. When the smoke clears, between 250 and 300 Lakota are dead, many shot in the back as they ran through the snow. Bodies were found 2 miles away. And here comes the disturbing part. The Army awarded around 20 Medals of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration, to the soldiers involved. To this day, not one has been revoked. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre of people who had surrendered, buried days later in a mass grave. And it took the country more than a century to officially acknowledge it. Only in 1990 did Congress express deep regret. Now, the man whose defeat of Custer led straight to this regiment's revenge. His ending is the strangest twist in the whole story. Number 7. It sounds like a joke, but it's all true. In 1876, at the Battle of Little Bighorn, Lakota and Cheyenne warriors under Sitting Bull's spiritual leadership wiped out General Custer's 7th Cavalry Regiment. It was the Army's worst defeat in the Indian Wars, and his name became a nightmare in Washington. So, where do you think the man who beat the U.S. Army ended up 9 years later? Traveling with Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show, earning $50 a week while crowds paid admission just to get a close look at the man who defeated Custer. He sold autographs and, according to some accounts, gave much of the money to beggars and poor children he saw in the cities. The ending is even more ironic. In December 1890, the government sent native police officers to arrest him on the Standing Rock Reservation, fearing he would support the ghost dance movement. A struggle broke out, shots were fired, and Sitting Bull was killed outside his own cabin, shot by men from his own people. The winner of the West's most famous battle didn't die in combat, he died at home. You keep hearing free West, free state, free land. Keep that word, free, in your head, because California was a free state with a law most people have never heard of. Number 8. Everyone learned that California entered the Union as a free state in 1850. But here's what the history books don't tell you. That same year, the state legislature passed a law called the Act for the Government and Protection of Indians. The name sounds nice, right? In practice, it allowed any native person considered a vagrant to be arrested and their labor auctioned off to the highest-paying farmer. Native children could be adopted by settlers and kept in servitude until the age of 30. Historians estimate that thousands of native people, especially women and children, were captured and sold between 1850 and 1863. A healthy boy was worth about $50, a girl up to $100. And there was more. Debt peonage, inherited from the Mexican system, tied workers to employers through debts that never ended. A person could work their entire life and die still owing money, and the debt would be passed down to their children. So, when someone sells you the free land of the West, remember it was free for the right skin and the right amount of money. For everyone else, the frontier was just another chain, and sometimes the chain came in a bottle. Number 9. Now a turn you won't expect, because it's actually good news, and it came from the land of cowboys and saloons. In December 1869, half a century before the rest of the country, Wyoming's territorial lawmakers passed a law granting women the right to vote. And the reason wasn't just principle. Wyoming had about 6 men for every woman and needed to attract families in order to grow. In 1870, Louisa Swain, a 69-year-old woman from the town of Laramie, left home carrying her bucket of yeast and made history as the first woman to vote in a general election. That same year, Esther Morris became the country's first female justice of the peace. Years later, when Congress suggested that Wyoming repeal the law in order to be admitted as a state, the response was direct. We would rather stay out of the Union than give up women's right to vote. In 1890, Wyoming entered the Union while keeping the law and earned the nickname the Equality State. It even elected the first female governor in the United States, Nellie Taylor Ross, in 1925. Western movies show duels and bank robberies, but hardly anyone tells this story. And now, back to that bottle. Number 10. Have you ever heard of the whiskey that wasn't really whiskey? In the Old West, traders found a way to get rich by selling poison. They called it Indian whiskey, but the recipe was horrifying. Cheap alcohol mixed with chewing tobacco, pepper, ginger, and, in some cases, even sulfuric acid to give it that burn in the throat. All of this was sold to native tribes, even though it had been illegal since 1834. And why didn't anyone stop it? Simple. The profits were insane. A gallon that cost pennies was traded for buffalo hides worth a fortune. Trading posts like the famous Fort Whoop-Up on the Canadian border became symbols of this dirty business. The result was devastating. Entire communities fell into addiction, violence exploded, and tribes that had survived wars ended up being destroyed from within, one bottle at a time. Things got so bad that the Canadian government created the Mounted Police in 1873 just to put an end to this trade. In the end, whiskey did what bullets had failed to do: bring down entire peoples without firing a single shot. Speaking of men who served a country that barely served them back, remember those Buffalo Soldiers from earlier? There's more to them than one disguised recruit. Number 11. After the Civil War, Congress created regiments made up entirely of black men, the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry. The Cheyenne were the ones who gave them the nickname, supposedly because of their hair and their bravery in battle. And here's a detail most people don't know. These men had the lowest desertion rate in the entire Army. While white soldiers deserted their posts in large numbers, they stayed. They served in the toughest campaigns in the West, escorted stagecoaches, protected telegraph lines, and built forts. 18 of them received the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. But the Army gave them horses rejected by other regiments, old weapons, and lower quality food. And in the towns they risked their lives to protect, many of them couldn't enter a saloon or even get a haircut at the barber shop. Some were attacked by civilians while wearing their own uniforms. Even so, they continued serving for decades, and today they are remembered as some of the most respected soldiers on the American frontier. Bullets, disease, whiskey, none of them ended the open West. What actually killed the free-roaming cowboy was a thing you could hold in one hand. Number 12. It wasn't a bullet, it was a piece of wire. In 1874, Joseph Glidden patented barbed wire, and within a few years it changed everything. Big ranchers began fencing off millions of acres, including the rivers and wells everyone used. Small ranchers, who depended on the open range, were shut out and watched their cattle die of thirst. That's when the fence-cutting wars began. Men went out before dawn with wire cutters, cutting through miles of fencing, and the big ranchers fought back with hired guns. The most famous case erupted in 1892 in Johnson County, Wyoming, when the cattle barons hired about 50 gunmen from Texas to eliminate small settlers accused of theft. The Army cavalry had to step in to prevent a full-scale massacre, and in the end, none of the powerful ranchers were punished. The wide-open, unclaimed West from the movies died right there, fenced off piece by piece. One last image before I tell you which story was buried hardest of all, and I warn you, it's the one people can't unsee. Number 13. Look at the photo and try to count the skulls. In the 1870s, scenes like this were common across the American plains. After hunters wiped out millions of bison, something no one expected became valuable: the bones. Poor farmers, many of them Civil War veterans, went out with wagons to collect skeletons scattered across the land. A ton of bones brought in between $4 and $12, a fortune for people struggling to get by. The piles grew next to the railroads in Kansas and Texas, waiting for trains to carry everything east. There, the bones were turned into fertilizer, and the skulls into charcoal used to refine sugar. Companies like Michigan Carbon Works processed tons of them every day, and the men climbed on top of mountains of skulls and posed for the photographer, smiling as if they were showing off a trophy. These images circulated around the country as advertisements for the business. It's estimated that the bones of more than 30 million animals passed through this trade. A massacre became an industry, and the industry made sure to document it all in photos that still shock anyone who sees them today.